Hello? Who am I to have an opinion? I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy Tactics the last 2 days, and there is an interesting sense to it because the recent re-release has voice acting in it. And I've read these lines of the game, I've read these words people say, I've played through it again and again and again, but now it seems a little different because I am viewing it through a new lens, right? Their voices and their sounds, the emphasis people put on different bits and pieces, the anguished cries of Miluda, the despair of Wheagraff. These are events which are meaningful to me, and at the same time are not, right? Because I read them, but I don't live them. I recognize that I play the game and I know things about it, and then I go online and I realize that there are folk who study it to a great deal, a much greater deal than me, right? The people who mod it, the people who have played through it 1,000 times, who have a favorite way of playing the game, a favorite rhyme and reason. And they can justify this based on information and experience and facts, the likes of which would take me a decade to reach, if I ever did reach them at all. Because as a point of fact, as far as I can tell, I'm just not that into anything in particular. Right? I'm talking about a game here. And the reason I don't know as much, the reason I don't feel like I can talk as well about it, the reason why it's affecting me again and again and again in a new way now is because I've only dived so deeply into it, right? It is not engaged my every waking thought. It is not something where I dive into the code and I keep up on the forums and I know about the newest mods, and I'm planning to revisit again and again and again. I do, but when I play a game like that, it is almost accidental what happens, almost accidental how I am affected. And I'm talking about a game here, but it's not really about the game. The same can be said of anything, I think. In any book, any story, Lord of the Rings, I'm into that, right? But I'm not that into it. I read science and physics, but I'm not a scientist. I read philosophy, but I don't do it professionally, right? When you read a piece on Kant, for example, I read the Critique of Pure Reason, and I think I understand it, and then I do it again. I read it again in a different class. I understand it in a different way. And then I read a paper someone wrote on it, and I realize I know very little at all. How a single sentence connects in different ways. And as we expand our viewpoint beyond the games and the academy into more everyday existence, other items come to the fore where I know how to fix a dent in a car, but I can't fix an engine. I know how to put on a new tire, but last time I did it, I didn't jack the car up right. I know how to swim, but I don't swim very well. I know how to read stories and legends of Zeus and Mars and Thor and the Monkey King. But then I read a book again telling me a story of them, and I am surprised again because I have forgotten so much. What I once knew is passed through me without touching me in any visible manner. As we enter politics and economics and ideas about race or sex or how one should live one's life, religion and belief, as we get into practical bits of knowledge like how to run a government or how to meet new people or how to not be depressed or how to make a living I know things, I say things, I understand things, but I only understand it to a degree, and I meet people again and again and again who know more than me, who have studied more than me, who have lived more than me in some small and particular and deep and specific way. I, like my mother before me, am a jack of all trades. I read a little, I write a little, I know some math, right? But I'm not up here doing Calc 3. I know some logic, but I'm not up here passing my classes with A pluses. I know some philosophy, but then I come down to writing a paper and all of a sudden I feel frustrated being stuck into a mold. And then as we leave what I have experienced, the academic world, as we leave the world of travel, as we leave the world of games, as we enter into some of the books I'm planning to read, which have to do with things like racism and taxes, The Price of America's Empire, Common Sense by Thomas Paine, How to be an Anti-Racist by Ibrahim X. Kendi, Political Consultants for Elections, The 100 Years' War on Palestine, Persian Myths and Legends, Just, there's always, and I don't know if I was directing that towards the microphone, but there's always more, right? I have an opinion and then I meet someone online or see a text and I begin to doubt myself. Perhaps I don't know what I know. Perhaps I haven't studied enough. Perhaps there's more to see. Perhaps my opinion is wrong. So who am I to have an opinion when I am a jack of all trades, when I read a little about a lot of things, when I know a little poetry, but I'm not up here winning prizes, and I'm not up here writing rhymes that follow a meter. And I could, I could study. I could get a degree in economics, in political action, political science, right? I could get a degree in biology or anthropology or mathematics or English, and even if I don't have a degree, I could study, right? I could learn and learn and learn and double down and focus and become like so many of the academics I know who probably have a broad base when it comes to their activity, when it comes to what they feel they can speak on. It becomes narrower and narrower. And there are people who go the opposite way. The less they know, the more confident they speak. And I am constantly worried I might make the mistake of going one of those two routes. Will I limit myself with qualifiers over and over again? Will I stand up and say something wrong, proudly, straightly defending my views and my ideas, and get it wrong and wrong and wrong? If I speak out on my feelings about racism or about taxes or about a war overseas or about genocide or about history or philosophy, what if I'm wrong? And more than that, I have my own issues with what if I upset somebody? What if I am in danger somewhere? What if what I say has no effect and I'm just yelling into the void, finding myself stressed out and angry and sad and trying, and all for naught, for nothing? I think that's part of the reason why I tend to be silent, because I feel I can see the future. I feel I can see the most likely cause, the most likely event, the most likely turn of the wheel, what's going to happen. I started this off by talking about a game. And the game has a storyline, it has a hero, it has rules. it has a series of events. And within those laws and boundaries, there are freedoms, the team you can have, the jobs you can learn, the reaction capabilities, and then the movement odds, and the weapons you use, and if you ride a chocobo or fight a goblin, whether a grenade explodes in your face, right? You can, to an extent, deal and control these. And in our daily lives, to a great extent, we can deal with and control what happens to us, who we talk to, how we feel, what their reaction is. We hold back all the time with friends and family, and even with ourselves, because we stand on safe, familiar ground most of the time. We know who we are, we know where we're going, we know where we came from. And even if there are great unknowns, if we don't face them, then it's comfortable being here alone. But if you're alone too long, then that creates its own problem as well. Why even bother being alive if you keep all your thoughts to yourself? Why even bother having a thought if they're all cut to yourself? I've been reading Marcus Aurelius, and this idea runs through the whole work, right? I can't control the world. I can only control myself. I can't make other people do something. I can only make myself do something. I can't control how people act, or if they're angry, or if they are deceived. And all I can do is work on my own ideas and logic and attempt to reason my way through this dark forest where we all reside, occasionally seeking out a star or a lamp or the sunrise out of the corner of my eye, and trying to rise up with that heat that comes from the ground and from the sky, that squeezes the fog that blinds us always. But if you've lived in the forest, if you've lived in the woods of Northern California, then there are days where the fog is always there in the hills. It might be 100 degrees Fahrenheit outside, but you can still see a wisp of fog in the hills. The unknown, the worries, they never go away. I am constantly worried about what people will say and how people will act, because I feel I'm in danger, right? Because I feel that I have to confront their ideas, right? So this is also in Marcus Aurelius, right? If we are all part of the same reasoning, right? If we're all part of the same universe, then we have something in common. We have reality in common. There is a old XKCD comic, which is an online comic series, where I recall it was something about AI, the rise of deepfake AI videos, and or video or pictures. And it was two people arguing, and one was saying, I'm very worried about this rise. And so if I go out and I speak my mind outside online, then I'm going to run into an AI system. And I mean that in a technical and a practical sense, right? Technical as in the comments you get on videos, right? The replies you receive, the emails you are sent. The information about yourself that leaks out are often due to automatic systems. Maybe not AI necessarily as it's understood today, but computer systems and bureaucracy. Just the grinding of the wheel as it moves on. And sometimes this is good and reliable, and it's how the world works and continues working. Other times it is the result of the blind or the deceptive, the ones who refuse to see who they hurt in their pushing of the wheel, the ones who are tied to the jail cell. They have to push and turn that wheel. The ones who use the turning of the wheel, use automatic systems to their own advantage. You know, people lie all the time. And people lie even to themselves. It can be the case that the ones who reply to me, the ones who I talk to, are not really thinking through their responses or their actions or their beliefs. They did once upon a time long ago, but that doesn't mean they revisit it every single day. So this too can be how we face an automatic system, an automatic person who sees us and judges us, what we say or think or feel, and thinks they know us and understands us, thinks that because they have always been the same, or they have reached a level of understanding and wisdom, that we should be the same, that we should agree with their wisdom and their understanding. There is a sense in the world, I think, for individual people, that to have someone challenge their worldview is dangerous, is an existential problem. If I say you are wrong, then how do you reply to me? How do you think about me? How do you think about my reasoning, right? Is there something in common? Is there a true goal or best case which we can actually reach? Or is it down to the individual and their own beliefs and wants and greed and fears, right? This XKCD comic where the two people are going back and forth, and one of them is saying, I'm worried about AI. Well, the reply, which I thought was extremely interesting, was that AI and deepfake videos are not the problem, right? The problem has always been lying, right? The limitation on how we know the truth has always been, do people lie? Because the world doesn't lie. Reality doesn't lie. Physics is always telling the truth, even if it's hard to understand sometimes. Chemistry is always doing what it does. Even, you know, our own biology, how we eat, is telling us information all the time. What we see and what we hear is actually happening. They aren't illusions in the sense that they deceive us. They are only mistakes which we do not work with correctly. You know, if we are hallucinating in a desert and we see a oasis on the horizon, but it is a mirage, and that oasis is still there. It's just that we have misinterpreted the light that reaches our eyes. There's no lie there. And so I'm always tempted to try to become a scientist. I'm always tempted to try to figure out the rules and the powers that be, how they work, so that I could have everything turn out perfectly, or at least turn out safely. I want my safety mechanisms to work. I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to believe a lie and then base myself on that lie, or my beliefs or my actions or my statements, and then have it turn out to be a lie. And then where am I left? Being wrong, being mistaken, and hurting myself or hurting other people because of what I've said and put out there in the world. So what if I'm wrong? But of course, what if I'm not wrong? What if I see something and it's worthwhile and it's makes someone out there think? You know, do I bear the stings and arrows of a sour disposition for the one in a million, or for myself who seeks to understand why I'm believing this thing or having an opinion? Where am I going with this? What am I doing? I'm making mistakes on purpose, right? That's science. having a hypothesis, testing out, having a hypothesis, testing it out. It's just that when it comes to social activity, when it comes to ideas of right and wrong, when it comes to the grand facets of life and society, the only way we get it wrong is by hurting somebody, right? Is by involving ourselves in life and hurting ourselves in many cases. That's what life is. Life is pain. Life is hurting. And life sometimes also is joy and wonderment and stupendous activities and love and happiness and warmth. But as Aurelius says, it all ends, and you never know when that is going to be. So perhaps we should live our life as if we were going to die today, or as if we had died yesterday and been reborn now and had we know not how much longer to live. Except we act each day as if we had time, right? If I take one step a day trying to improve myself, the idea is that one day I will reach a higher level. One day I'll be happy, or at least content, or at least proud of what I am and what I do. And if I fail and die before that, then I will have disappointed myself. And perhaps we should throw that idea away. Right? Perhaps we should be happy and stoic. But there is this other idea as well, that contentment and happiness only take us so far. Sometimes we have to be wrong. Sometimes we need to be unhappy. Sometimes we need to torture ourselves in order to push ourselves. Because we've gotten into a rut. We've stuck ourselves inside a box for years or a decade. And now we either see beyond the walls of that box, or we grow too large for the box. And what do we do now? We break a hole in the wall and squeeze through the opening, leaving our blood and streaks of flesh and broken bones behind. But at least we've made it. At least we're free. And as for who am I to have an opinion, I am nobody. I'm nothing. I'm just a guy out here who reads and thinks and feels and dreams about events, right? I'm a person who has an identity that is changing all the time, and I'm going to be wrong. I'm going to make mistakes. But I have seen beyond the walls of that box. And we come to the crux of the problem, right? Who am I speaking for? Is it you? The strangers who might see this? Is it for nobody, the void, who doesn't care about this? Is it for myself, the person who is struggling with these ideas and thoughts? Is it for hope? Is it for despair? Is it against the gods? Is it with a holy idea? Is it in the depths of philosophy? Is it a little daemon platonically upon me which screams out and says, I should be something different, I should dare to do and say? Because I am going to have opinions anyway. Every person you see around us has an opinion, even if they're silent. And I think most people are most of the time. They just want to live their life. They don't talk about politics or religion or race or problems, right? They go to work. They play with their friends. They have their family. They are happy. Or if not happy, at least content. Their struggles are small. Their issues are barely there. and certain troubles they may have, but these troubles either sneak up upon them slowly, or they have grown to accept them. Right? There are pains I have which I'm never going to get away from. My knee, my shoulder, my eyes. Certain regrets I have and ideas of good and bad. But that doesn't mean that I have to always be that way. That doesn't mean I always have to be afraid. It doesn't mean I have to be silent and sitting there wondering, thinking and hoping that one day I'll be better. Well, perhaps we can just say that that day is today. Right? I will be better today, not someday, not tomorrow. And even as I have opinions that I carry with me, do I unburden myself of them by speaking? Do I open up my doubts? Do I fully and openly confront the reason of the world with my own reason, hoping beyond hope that we can find a common ground, that we can learn to live in a better way? Even as I disagree with what other people say or think, and they disagree with me, is there a path through this mist? Is there a way through the dark woods? And I speak in metaphors, I speak in rhymes, I speak indirectly all the time. And that's because in order to climb up high and see the sun, or beyond the sun in a Platonic fashion, we sometimes do very strange things. And there are many other activities I could be doing. There are many other ways I could do this, but perhaps I just need to start on one, to choose one, instead of thinking and trying to game out the system, trying to figure out the rules, trying to be safe. I can take a chance. Because who am I to have an opinion? I am someone who is alive. I am someone who is wrong, and sometimes right. The point is, speaking my opinions out loud helps me to sleep at night, and when you're in my position, there are very few things more important than that. Just being able to stand up with a little bit of pride. Just being able to look yourself in the eye, in a mirrored eye, and know that even as I'm wrong, even as I say and do what so many tell me I should not, or I believe using the wrong, mistaken facts, or I say things that I later learn are wrong, as I am challenged in every direction and by every degree by somebody, at least I can say that I was me. Right? There's a reason I'm reading Aurelius. There's a reason I remember Mencius. There's a reason I read Emerson every year. And why is that? We're coming off of the meditations, and these, in a way, are my own meditations. Because who am I to have an opinion? I am just like you. I am a person. And even if I am a person who is full of doubts and troubles, staying silent is not, I believe, going to assist me in those troubles. There are perhaps better ways and faster ways and smarter ways and more sure ways to continue down the road of my own making, but those are for others. At least for a while, this is mine. At least for a while, I'm going to look myself in the eye.